All right, all right.
Okay. Hi, you're watching Dante's Boxing Nation.
How good is Crawford?
Crawford is amazing, not just good. He's amazing. I think he should be in the book for
Really? Is that good?
how to learn boxing. You know.
Really?
He's a very good fighter. Yeah, I like to watch his fights.
For me, pound for pound, number one is Terence Crawford. I like this man.
I think it's Crawford first.
I think Terence Crawford right now in the sport of boxing is the pound for pound best fighter in the sport of boxing right now.
So the old media defense campaign begins. Mike Coppinger, he just interviewed Canelo Alvarez, and he's already trying to push the narrative that Terence Crawford is not at any type of size disadvantage, as if he did not just move up 2 weight classes, which can almost be considered 3 weight classes.
Terence Crawford, when he's standing next to you, he doesn't seem that much smaller, actually. Yeah. And I know a couple of years ago you were saying you didn't want to entertain a fight with him because you wouldn't get any credit if you won. It does feel like you're going to get credit if you win now, right?
Yeah, of course. He's a great fighter. I've been in that situation before. Moving up in weight, 2 weight classes, 1 weight class, a lot of things. And, I'm not underestimate him. I know he's a good fighter and he's going to put his best in the training camp. But, every advantage I have, I'm going to take it.
Let me first start by saying this. Canelo, he's definitely going to get credit if he beats Terence Crawford, the best fighter in the world. The only thing is he won't get the same amount of credit that Terence Crawford will get because Canelo did not take the risk that Crawford took. Crawford moved up, like I said, 2-3 weight classes to fight against Canelo Alvarez. Canelo would never move up 2 weight classes to fight a talent like Terence Crawford, and we all know that. Even if Crawford was a natural super middleweight, Canelo would rather fight David Benavidez than fight that version of Crawford. Because that version of Crawford, he would completely annihilate Canelo Alvarez, meaning he would knock him out. He would probably have him laying on the canvas looking like Jin Sasaki. The only reason this fight is competitive is because of the handicap, is because of the fact that Crawford has never fought at 168. Hell, he's never fought at 160. So once again, Mike Coppinger is pretty much trying to push the narrative that this is an even fight and there is no size disadvantage. Why? Because they almost look the same size when they stand next to each other. But so did Amir Khan when he was standing next to Canelo. So did Jermell Charlo when he was standing next to Canelo. I'll take it even a step further. When you look at this photo of Devin Haney standing next to David Benavidez, a lot of people were saying, damn, he almost looked just as big as David Benavidez. So when you say almost, that means if you look at this photo, it looks like Devin Haney could damn near fight at 160, right? If Devin Haney was standing next to Carlos Adames, Virgil Ortiz, or Janibek, Devin Haney, he would look like he's almost the same size as them. But we all know that if Devin Haney decided to jump up to middleweight right now, he would be at a massive size disadvantage. But understand this. This doesn't mean that you're going to automatically lose if you have that size advantage, size disadvantage. It just means you're going into the race giving your opponent a head start. Now, for those of you guys who are not that familiar with Mike Coppinger, let me give you guys just a little bit of his history. So first of all, I think I already told you guys that he works for the Ring magazine. He's also one of the only old media reporters that has been banned from covering PBC fights because of his repeated racially biased statements about some of the black boxers that fight with PBC and because of the anti-PBC remarks that he has made publicly. When Mike Coppinger worked for ESPN, he personally had Alexander Usyk on the pound-for-pound list at number 5. But I'm talking about before Usyk moved to heavyweight, when he was the undisputed cruiserweight champion. But when Jermell Charlo became undisputed at the junior middleweight division, which was and still is one of the deepest divisions in the sport of boxing, Mike Coppinger and the rest of ESPN, they did not even have Charlo on the pound-for-pound list. And this is the reason why Jermell Charlo publicly exposed Mike Coppinger at his post-fight press conference.
Mike Coppinger, ESPN. Congrats on an amazing performance, becoming undisputed.
Are you sure?
You gonna share that list?
We love him. Don't worry about it.
We love you. We love him. We love
Hey,
you.
I was on you from the beginning. I know you remember that. So,
Go and ask your question.
first, you had the fight with
You
Tony.
gotta get your shit together. You always hating on people and shit. You see, you gotta come back to me now. You gotta respect me now. You got no choice but to respect me now. Yeah. I did what I had to do. Yeah. Nowhere. I'm trying to look back. He did see that. Come on. Yeah. You gonna share that list? Did you hear what Derek James said right there? You see, I never understood that, and that always bothered me when I watched this post-fight press conference, because Derek James, out of nowhere, he interjects and says, "We love Mike Coppinger," and Jamel Charlo is like, "I don't love him. You love him." That always made me cringe, and it always bothered me to see him go out of his way to say something like that, and clearly it bothered Jamel. But then again, Derek James, he's the same trainer who decided to train Ryan Garcia after everything that he had said about black people. Why would you say, "We love Mike Coppinger," a man that has never gave Jamel Charlo any credit? Do you guys know even after Jamel Charlo became undisputed, they still did not have him on the pound-for-pound list? After he just completely exposed Mike Coppinger, ESPN, they still omitted Jamel Charlo from the pound-for-pound list. And remember, just in case I didn't say it before, at this time, Mike Coppinger, he worked for ESPN. He was one of the staff members that chose who would be on that pound-for-pound list, which is the reason why Jamel Charlo was going at Mike Coppinger at this post-fight press conference. Now, just to show you guys the receipts, the Charlo versus Castaño 2 fight took place on my birthday, May 14th, 2022. Here's ESPN's pound-for-pound list in August of that same year. Not only do they not have the undisputed champion Jamel Charlo on this list, but they also omitted the undisputed champion Devin Haney. That's right. Neither one of them were on this list. And you know why ESPN did this? Because they no longer wanted their list to look predominantly black. You guys have to remember, at this time, it was old media that made being undisputed the biggest thing in boxing. So soon as they start doing that, guess what black boxers start doing? They start saying, "Oh, old media is praising the hell out of fighters to become undisputed, like Canelo and Usyk." Okay, so if that's how we get the praise that we deserve, then we want to become undisputed. But once they became undisputed, this is what happened. I'm telling you guys right now, this all stems from when Paulie Malignaggi got fired from Showtime because of the many racist remarks that he made. But this is one of the main things that he said. He said it's no longer the time of the African American anymore in boxing. It is the Eastern Europeans that has become the dominant species in boxing. I'm telling y'all, man, you guys need to really pay attention closely to what's going on in the sport of boxing. What Paulie Malignaggi said, it was a Donald Trump moment in boxing. What does that mean? I'll explain. You see, Donald Trump, he says a lot of racist things that a lot of other racist people are afraid to say out loud. They feel the same way Trump feels, but they don't want to say it because they're afraid of the backlash. They're afraid of being exposed as a racist. Donald Trump says it for them. And because Donald has so much influence, it inspires other racist people to follow that narrative more comfortably. And this is exactly what old media did with Paulie Malignaggi's remarks. Old media feels the same way Paulie Malignaggi felt when he said that. But they know that they can't come out openly and endorse what he said. But instead, what they can do is they can use their pound-for-pound list to push the propaganda that Paulie Malignaggi basically started. And that's what they're doing today. If you look at the pound-for-pound list, The Ring in particular, I'm telling you guys, the Ring magazine pound-for-pound list has never looked like this. The Ring magazine pound-for-pound list has always had a number of black American boxers, but old media is trying to change that now with their propaganda. Listen, they can try to mislead the public all they want, but the reality is there is no country on the planet that has as much talent as America does, and it's not even close. Not Russia, not Kazakhstan, not Ukraine, not Japan, not the Philippines or Mexico. There's no country that even comes close to having a team as dominant as Team USA. So let's get back to Mike Coppinger. You heard Jamel Charlo, he told Mike Coppinger to stop hating on fighters. But Mike Coppinger's hate has never extended to boxers that were not black. Mike has been trying to protect Canelo Alvarez for years when it comes to Canelo not fighting David Benavidez. But that has backfired and forced Mike to completely contradict his stance when it comes to Canelo avoiding Benavidez over the years. I want you to listen to what Mike said back in 2023.
Realistically, what are the chances we see Canelo Benavidez in May or in September?
I mean, look, obviously Jaime Munguia would be easy work for Canelo Alvarez. I think we all know that, but it would be an exciting fight, and it would be a fight between two Mexicans and the guy Jaime Munguia, who has a big following, even if it's not as nearly as big as Canelo's. But I don't buy all this duck talk. I think Canelo Alvarez, over the years, as the biggest star in boxing, has proven that he has no issue fighting the best fighters out there. He fought Dimitri Bivol at a higher weight class when no one was looking to fight him, and I have no doubt that Canelo Alvarez is going to fight David Benavidez. People are calling for the fight now. Canelo said he wanted to see Benavidez earn it, and I think certainly with this banner year, win over Caleb Plant, win over Demetrius Andrade, we could say that Benavidez has definitively earned that fight. So if Canelo Alvarez does not fight Benavidez in May or September, I would be quite surprised, and I think that Canelo Alvarez would be the favorite over Benavidez with good reason.
Okay, so that's what he says in 2023. He says Canelo, he is going to fight David Benavidez. He's just waiting for David to prove himself. But for the meantime, Canelo is going to fight Jaime Munguia. And then he starts defending that fight, saying, yeah, you know, it's going to be an easy fight, but it's going to be an exciting fight because it's two Mexicans. The same excuse that Canelo Alvarez used why he didn't want to fight David Benavidez in the first place. And of course, Mike Coppinger, he never explains why Jaime Munguia didn't have to prove himself to get the fight. So anyway, a year goes by. A year later, after Mike Coppinger once again tried to defend Canelo not fighting David Benavidez, now Paulie Malignaggi is on Canelo's helmet, and he's clowning him on Instagram or whatever. I think this is Twitter, actually. But Paulie Malignaggi, he comes out and calls Canelo a straight duck, even puts up an image of Canelo being a duck. And you guys have to remember, at this time, everybody was pushing for Canelo Alvarez to fight David Benavidez. Because a couple years before, when Canelo was avoiding David, everyone was quiet. But around 2024, everybody got extremely vocal. A lot of boxers, whenever people did interviews, they all said he needs to fight David Benavidez. And there were two people in particular that really stuck their neck out for Canelo Alvarez. That was Mike Coppinger and Chris Mannix. But Mike Coppinger in particular, he responded to what Paulie Malignaggi had put up, and he said this: yeah, Canelo is real scared. The same guy that fought Austin Trout, Edislani Lara, Dimitri Bivol at 175, no less. Canelo was a major A-side in all three fights, and no one was banging down the door for those difficult matchups. Canelo will end up fighting Benavidez too. Watch. It's crazy, man, because Mike Coppinger, he talks like someone that you would expect to be some young troll on the internet that is really a decaf, a dumb casual ass fan that really doesn't know anything about the sweet science or the sport in general. First of all, recently, Canelo himself has made it all but clear he's not going to fight David Benavidez at all, unless David Benavidez gets knocked out a couple times and he no longer looks like the same fighter. Mike Coppinger's logic is so kindergarten. He's not scared of DB because he fought Trout, Lara, and Bivol. Not only do none of these fighters have David Benavidez's style, but let's just start with Austin Trout. Austin Trout, that was the first step up in competition for Canelo Alvarez. That was the first time he was fighting against a real champion, and he was put in a 50-50 fight. Do you guys know why he even took that fight in the first place? He took that fight because Floyd Mayweather, he actually told Canelo Alvarez, before we fight, you have to fight someone. Like, you have to take on a big fight. Because if I fight you without you fighting anyone, then I don't get any credit for the win. That's what Floyd Mayweather was basically telling Canelo. So Floyd, he ordered Canelo to take the Austin Trout fight to sell the Mayweather-Canelo Alvarez fight. That's why Canelo, he took that fight for one. When it comes to the Lara fight, Canelo, he avoided Lara for years. It wasn't until Lara, he snuck on the stage and called out Canelo Alvarez in front of the whole world. And you know what happened? A lot of fans directly from Mexico, they started putting pressure on Canelo to take the Lara fight. That's why Canelo, he took the fight. But still, if you compare Lara to David Benavidez, Lara is not known for his power. Lara is a fighter who moves away from you. And you have David Benavidez, who is an actual knockout artist that comes straight forward. He can box and he can fight on the inside. Not only can he match Canelo's power, he might even be stronger than Canelo Alvarez, on top of him being taller and longer and durable. When it comes to the Bivol fight, Canelo Alvarez was forced to fight against Bivol. At that time, the walls were closing in on Canelo Alvarez. He had two deals on the table. He had a PBC deal and he had the DAZN deal. The PBC deal included a fight against David Benavidez and against Jamal Charlo. But I'm talking about the Jamal Charlo, the one that was a beast, the one that knocked out Julian J. Rock Williams, the one that fought Sergey Derevyanchenko, not the one that we see today. This version of Charlo we see today is a shadow of himself. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if this version of Jamal Charlo loses to Caleb Plant. But anyway, once again, the deal that was put on the table was either the PBC deal or the DAZN deal. The DAZN deal included a third match with Gennady Golovkin and a fight against Bivol. Canelo, he didn't want to fight any of these guys. He wanted to fight Makabu, a fighter that almost no one had ever heard of. But Canelo was dead serious when he was trying to make this fight. He had already met up with Makabu. They already had somewhat of a press conference, a face-off. He was really trying to sell this fight. But then he got the bad news from DAZN and PBC when they told him, we're not going to pay for this fight because no one knows who Makabu is. That's when he was forced to make the tough decision of once again picking the DAZN deal or the PBC deal. Now, since Canelo Alvarez has had so much success against Eastern European fighters, he picked the DAZN deal. But he finally ended up picking the wrong European fighter in Bivol. So one of the many differences from the Bivol fight and a potential David Benavidez fight is Canelo Alvarez, he's not being forced to fight David Benavidez. He doesn't have to fight him if he doesn't want to. But he had no choice but to once again either take the PBC deal or the DAZN deal. The other difference is the styles. Once again, David Benavidez, he comes forward. He's aggressive. He's a hard puncher. Bivol is not known for his power. He's more of a volume puncher, and that's only sometime. He's more of a boxer that's going to move around the ring, bounce in and out. David Benavidez would knock out Canelo Alvarez. He would run him over. Canelo wouldn't even be able to get away from David's jab, which would ultimately set up all of Benavidez's bombs. So what Mike really wants to say is, because Canelo fought this guy, he shouldn't have to fight that guy. But if we use that logic, then that means Mayweather, he never had to fight Canelo Alvarez or Manny Pacquiao. But we know these same old media members, they wasn't having that. They was putting all the pressure in the world on Floyd Mayweather to fight Manny Pacquiao, even though it was Manny Pacquiao who originally turned down the fight in 2008 because he did not want to do the Olympic-style random drug testing. Not one single media member said there's no way Floyd Mayweather is scared of Manny Pacquiao because look at all the other people that Mayweather has already fought. It was the complete contrary. They were all implying that Floyd Mayweather was this big coward who was terrified of Manny Pacquiao. Now let's get back to the size disparity. Once again, Mike Kopp, he's already trying to defend Canelo Alvarez just in case he wins the fight by saying, oh, you guys look like you're almost the same size when you stand next to each other. Now, what's so ironic when it comes to Mike Coppinger and the rest of old media is whenever there's a black fighter that may just appear to look like he's taller or anything like that, they immediately push the narrative going into that fight. Devin Haney, for example, versus Lomachenko. That's all old media talked about leading up to the fight. Fight Hub, and everyone else. They kept saying over and over that Devin Haney, he looks so much bigger than Lomachenko. They kept saying that, despite the fact that they have both been fighting in the same weight class for years, unlike Terence Crawford. Do you guys see the dichotomy? Because Devin Haney was taller and had longer arms, they continued to say over and over and over leading up to that fight, Devin Haney is so much bigger. Even during the fight, they would say it. They wanted to put it in your head, just in case Devin Haney wins this fight, he does not deserve credit for it because he was too big. Same thing happened when Shakur Stevenson fought Oscar Valdez. They kept saying that Shakur Stevenson, he was so much bigger than Oscar Valdez. But you know the funny thing about that? It was Shakur Stevenson who had just moved up in weight. That was Oscar Valdez's weight class. Shakur had just moved up in weight to fight against Oscar Valdez, and they still kept saying over and over and over leading up to that fight, Shakur Stevenson looks so much bigger because they wanted to take all the credit away from Shakur just in case he won the fight, which they knew he was going to win the fight. I remember the week of the fight, Shakur Stevenson, he kept saying, they're going to try to take credit from me when I beat Oscar Valdez. They're going to say I'm bigger, et cetera, et cetera. And it's so funny because right after he said that, Fight Hub interviewed Shakur Stevenson. He said, Shakur, you're the bigger guy, you're taller, you're longer. How are you going to use that to your advantage? Not one old media member has ever called Sebastian Fundora the bigger guy. None of them have ever called David Benavidez when he fought at 168. None of them had ever called him the bigger guy. None of them ever called him a weight bully. And yet old media calls Shakur Stevenson the bigger guy when he is the one that has moved up in weight. Here's another statistic for you. There has never been a time in the sport of boxing where a non-black boxer moved up in weight to fight someone and he was considered the bigger guy, the bigger opponent. When Floyd Mayweather beat Juan Manuel Marquez, these same old media members tried their best to discredit Floyd Mayweather's win, saying it was because he was bigger, despite the fact that Floyd Mayweather had came off of a 2-year retirement, and this is the same Marquez that knocked out Manny Pacquiao. In fact, the week of the fight, leading up to the Manny Pacquiao-Marquez fight, the fourth fight, I remember they interviewed Manny Pacquiao and they asked him, why is this fight, the fourth one, going to be different than the previous fights with Marquez? You know what Manny Pacquiao said? He said, because now I'm the bigger guy. He said that. He said, I'm the bigger guy. I've been fighting at welterweight for quite some time, so I'm going to have the advantage over Marquez. And that was the fight he got knocked out in. My point is that version of Marquez is the same one that Mayweather completely dominated, made it look extremely easy. When Lomachenko fought Guillermo Rigondeaux, there was no mention that Loma was much bigger than Rigo. The week of that fight, no reporters was saying to Lomachenko, you know, you're taller, you're bigger, you're 2 weight classes bigger than him. How are you going to use that to your advantage? These are the type of questions they were asking Shakur Stevenson, Fight Hub, and the rest of old media. And remember, in that fight, it was Shakur that moved up in weight. Oscar Valdez had already been at the weight class for years. He was completely acclimated to the weight. Once again, to give you guys even more contrast, when Devin Haney fought Lomachenko, that's all we heard from old media is Haney is bigger than Lomachenko. No mention of this when Loma was fighting against Guillermo. We know what time it is. So when it comes to Terence Crawford versus Canelo Alvarez, there's no doubt Crawford can still beat Canelo with his size disadvantage. But it's extremely offensive for old media to imply that this is not a handicap match just to try to make the win look better if Canelo pulls it off. I think we can all agree Terence Crawford is the one taking all the risk, jumping all the way up 2 weight classes to fight Canelo. The only risk Canelo is taking in this fight is his reputation taking a hit. It would be the most embarrassing loss of his career, hands down. If you are comparing this to Canelo Alvarez's other losses, he lost to Floyd Mayweather. That was even a little bit embarrassing because he lost to an old man who was 36, almost 37, way smaller than him, got completely dominated in the fight. We know that if the roles were reversed, right? If it was Floyd Mayweather that was 23 years old, fought at a higher weight class, and he was fighting against a 36-year-old Canelo Alvarez, imagine Floyd Mayweather losing to someone like that. Can you imagine the type of backlash he would get from old media and the rest of the race fans? But because Black American boxers are so dominant in the sport, old media, they looked at it as Canelo losing to Floyd Mayweather. Hey, that's a badge of honor. You went 12 rounds with Michael Jordan. You deserve to be a star now. And the rest is history. So that is the reason why, that Canelo Alvarez loss should have been considered one of his embarrassing losses, one of his most embarrassing. But number one, like I said, would be Crawford if he loses to Crawford, because Crawford is going to be at a bigger size disadvantage than Floyd Mayweather was. But if there's any fighter in the sport of boxing that can flourish under those circumstances, it would be Terence "Bud" Crawford. Now, I'll close out with this last point. I remember when Shane Mosley, he actually jumped up 2 weight classes to fight Oscar De La Hoya, when Oscar was considered pound for pound one of the best fighters in the world. Shane Mosley, he beat him. But what I remember vividly is when Shane Mosley was doing his ring walk, Larry Merchant, he said that there should be no excuses of Shane Mosley being smaller than Oscar De La Hoya if Oscar wins this fight. Why? Because Shane Mosley, when they were kids, Shane Mosley fought at a higher weight class than Oscar De La Hoya. Shane and the amateurs fought at 140 while Oscar De La Hoya was fighting at 135. This was the rationale that Larry Merchant used to try to justify a full credit win if Oscar were to beat the smaller Shane Mosley. I mean, just looking at this photo right here, you can see the size of Shane Mosley and you can see the size of Oscar De La Hoya. But going back to what Larry Merchant said when it comes to the amateurs was extremely misleading. Because Oscar De La Hoya, he did fight at 140, the same weight class as Shane Mosley, and he ended up losing to Shane Mosley in the amateurs. So when they went to the Olympic trials, Oscar De La Hoya, he decided to move down to 135 to avoid having to fight Shane Mosley again. And that's how Oscar De La Hoya, he made it to the Olympics. Shane Mosley would end up losing to Vernon Forrest in the same Olympic trials. That's why he didn't go and Vernon Forrest went to the Olympics. And Oscar De La Hoya was the one that ended up getting a gold medal. Oscar, he made a calculated decision that paid off in a major way. Listen, when it comes to this fight between Terence Crawford and Canelo Alvarez, everyone's prediction is the exact same. People either say Crawford is going to win this fight because he's just too skilled, or they say Canelo Alvarez is going to win this fight because he's just too big. It's just too much of a size disparity. This is what every single professional boxing expert says about this fight. So how is it possible old media members like Mike Coppinger is going to try to ignore the fact that Canelo Alvarez's biggest advantage in this fight would be his size? The main question you should be asking Canelo Alvarez is, you are naturally the bigger guy. How are you going to use that advantage in the ring? And I'm going to keep reminding you guys, these are the questions these same reporters was asking Devin Haney when he fought Lomachenko, Shakur Stevenson when he fought Oscar Valdez. But they don't want to ask the question to Canelo Alvarez when he has the biggest size advantage over all of those other fighters that they asked that question to. Make it make sense. These American old media members, they don't want to ask Canelo Alvarez that question because they are trying to protect him at all costs. They're going to continue to try their best to mislead the public, but it ain't going to work, especially when people like me got a microphone in my hand. With that being said, I'm going to wrap this video up. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
All right, now check this out, guys. If you're looking to repair eczema scars, burns and bruises, dark spots and blemishes, the fever blisters, diabetic ulcers, this right here is the perfect product for you guys. It's called LO Key Face and Body Oil. Athletes and top-ranking boxers, they're also using it after training to reduce swelling, inflammation, and to ease the pain. So get yours today. Go to lodkey.com.
Like them on Facebook and follow them on Instagram.
Let me tell you guys about Issa Israel Law Firm. It is a full-service legal practice based in Denver, Colorado, an emerging hub for combat sports and high-altitude training. If you're a fighter inside or outside of the ring and you need a law firm you can trust to fight for you, visit thefighterfirm.com or email help@iilawfirm.com. Legal representation is usually limited to plaintiffs or defendants in Colorado, but iFirm can help anyone in the world with trademarking their business name, logos, and U.S. immigration issues. This brother has been my attorney for a while and helped guide me through all kinds of business and civil issues, so make sure you guys go to thefighterfirm.com.